G'day, and welcome to Tartarian Truthers with your hosts Casey and JoJo.
Hello, everyone. We're back, and thanks for waiting for us. We know we left you hanging again, but you will not be disappointed with today's interesting episode. We promise. So, what we're looking into today has been on your mind for a while now, Jojo,
hmm
and it's got nothing to do with Aussie history or even Tartaria. It's a whole other kettle of fish. It's the whole theory of evolution versus creationism, and it seems to be a hot topic of late, especially in this truth seeking community of ours. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what, Casey? It really has been a bit of a hot topic. And um, you're right. You know what? It's probably been on my mind since childhood because I just remember going to Sunday school. I was raised Catholic and I went to Sunday school and I learned all about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. And then I'd go to school and I'd be taught something completely different that contradicts the whole story of creation. And I think that's why we're so bloody confused, to be honest. So, what is it? Is it evolution, creationism, or what? And, Casey, after we had Tom on the show, he really made me think that, you know, there had to be a past intelligent civilization pre Adam that didn't involve dinosaurs or monkey men in cave dwellings. And the other thing that I found very interesting and thought was if you believe in the theory of evolution, does that mean that you don't or can't believe in God?
Yeah, right. Good question. And I've been sitting on the fence for so long regarding all of this. So I think it's time to take a good hard look at what we've all been taught.
Let's do it. Okay, so creationism or intelligent design is the belief that life and the universe were created by a supernatural being, an intelligent designer, an omnipotent, benevolent God. Evolution, on the other hand, is the process by which different kinds of organisms developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of Earth. But did you know that the theory of evolution is exactly that? Just a theory. And it only came along, or came about, sorry, in the 1700s. And you'll find it interesting that there are no records in any of our ancient texts that documents or even discusses us evolving from monkeys. It's not depicted in our art, earlier history books, or even the Bible. Now, let's take a look at this relatively new concept, shall we?
The theory of evolution by natural selection was first formulated in Charles Darwin's book On the Origin of Species, published in 1859. In his book, Darwin describes how organisms evolve over generations through the inheritance of physical or behavioral traits. The theory starts with the premise that within a population there is variation in traits, such as beak shape in one of the Galapagos finches Darwin studied. According to the theory, individuals with traits that enable them to adapt to their environments will help them survive and have more offspring, which will inherit those traits. Individuals with less adaptive traits will less frequently survive to pass them on. Over time, the traits that enable species to survive and reproduce will become more frequent in the population, and the population will change or evolve. Through natural selection, Darwin suggested genetically diverse species could arise from a common ancestor. Darwin did not know the mechanisms by which traits were passed on. He did not know about genetics, the mechanism by which genes encode for certain traits, and those traits are passed from one generation to the next. He also did not know about genetic mutation, which is the source of natural variation.
So, this excerpt was from a National Geographic article admitting that Darwin didn't even know about genetics during his evaluation of his theory, yet it has since well been adopted and taken on as fact since its inception. And it seems a bit odd. So, for evolution to be true, you'd think that monkeys would have been made extinct in this process of natural selection, right?
Yeah, totally.
Mm. This article from Live Science indicates that there was a Greek philosopher by the name of Anaximander of Miletus who lived in the 500s BCE, before Common Era. He speculated that humans must have descended from some other type of creature because babies are born helpless, and the creature whose young could survive without help were fish, and was convinced that that's where we evolved from.
Yeah, see, this is what I remember being taught. I've still got this vision in my head from this book at school. And it was, of the fish with like legs coming onto land.
Mhm. I remember
You know,
that too.
I remember just going, "What? We came from fish?" Yeah, it's weird. So anyway, this article goes on to say that Anaximander was correct. Humans can indeed trace our ancestry back to fish. His idea, however, was not a theory in the scientific meaning of the word, because it could not be subjected to testing that might support it or prove it wrong. In science, the word theory indicates a very high level of certainty. Scientists talk about evolution as a theory, for instance, just as they talk about Einstein's explanation of gravity as a theory.
But is that statement true? I've recently watched a video of three leading scientific scholars discussing the increasing amount of evidence that points to an intentional design and creation of the physical world. Let's check it out.
Michael, John, and Steve, welcome. First question, Darwin versus Einstein. Einstein publishes the special theory of relativity in 1905, and in the 12-ish decades since that publication, one observation after another has tended to confirm his work. Just a decade ago, scientists found clocks on satellites in elliptical orbits kept time just about as Einstein would have predicted. Over time, to put it crudely, Einstein has become easier and easier to believe. Darwin publishes On the Origin of the Species in 1859. Briefly, as was true of Einstein, also of Darwin, has he become easier and easier to believe? Michael?
No, the opposite.
The opposite. John?
The exact opposite.
Stephen?
Theory has been progressively disconfirmed by multiple observations in multiple subdisciplines of biology.
All right, all three of you come out swinging. Gentlemen, you're about to take a layman through three problems with Darwin that the last few decades have turned up.
Wow, that is very interesting. And if you guys want to watch this video in its entirety, we'll include the link in the description. But this video was released only fairly recently, and there are a lot of people that agree. So if these findings are true, I wonder how long it will take for the theory of evolution to stop being taught in our schools. Hmm.
Yeah, you know what I wonder? So many have already bought into this whole theory. It's going to take a lot to rewrite history books. And, strangely, uh, this doesn't explain the evolution of other creatures on our realm. Like, it's very,
Yeah,
very strange.
yeah. That's what I find weird, because it's not like all species have evidence of evolution. I mean, we looked at the evolution of a bear, and the bear was still a bear, no matter how many millions of years ago. There was no gradual natural selection process to the present day bear. They still look pretty much like earlier species, just bigger back then, which we've mentioned in other episodes about our megafauna here in Australia and how everything was much larger in the past. But this just makes me laugh, because koalas and other any Aussie animals, like the platypus or the kangaroo, I mean, they just don't add up either. Like,
Mm-mm.
where did they evolve from?
They so don't. They so don't. And this is hilarious. I have 60 other reasons why koalas spit in the face of natural selection.
That's true.
Oh dear. And, so why is it that natural selection works differently for what seems to be every other creature of the animal kingdom, even insects? Isn't it strange?
Mm,
Mm,
yeah, it's weird. Doesn't make sense.
no, no. The ant apparently was created perfectly 32 million years ago, according to this anyway.
Same as crocodiles.
Yeah. Yep.
Alligators. They're like, oh, they're like from the dinosaurs. Like,
Yep.
really?
Didn't change, didn't evolve.
So,
Very strange. Now, let's take a look at what we've been told about early humans. And if you do a search, you will find endless complex charts showing the evolution of man. And you'll always find words like replica. They don't even have the evidence of real skulls. And we're not going to go into much detail here, but let's check out these handsome specimens, shall we? With these ever changing features over millions of years, yet the original ape and modern Homo sapiens are the only two to have survived this natural selection process. Everyone in between is somehow becoming extinct.
yeah, okay, once again, weird. Now, I know there are folks out there that are going to say that scientists or archaeologists have found prehistoric human remains, but like, how do we know that those remains weren't that of an ape? Remember, all of these pictures are imagined and reconstructed by paleo artists,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Artists.
Gosh.
Yeah, so as for us, said to be here at the peak of evolution, and only this guy and this guy remain. I don't know who this guy is meant to be, but if we're not careful,
Mm-hmm. Definitely looks like we're heading that way, doesn't it?
yes.
And I don't believe we're at the peak of evolution at all.
No.
Now, Casey, did you know that Charles Darwin, he actually wasn't the only person who discovered or came up with the theory of evolution in the 18th and 19th century?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the historical record shows that there were roughly 70 different individuals that published work on the topic of evolution between 1748 and 1859, which happens to be the year that Darwin published his book on the origin of species.
Something smells fishy here. I mean, I wonder if it was like a competition to see who could come up with the most convincing evolution theory, like those supposed building contests that they used to have.
Seems like it, huh? And we don't know much about this Charles Darwin character, do we? And when we did do a bit of research on him, the first thing that you noticed was all of these bunch of titles after his name or acronyms. And you're like, what does all that mean? So
Yeah.
let's take a look.
So the FRS stands for the Fellow of the Royal Society, which is a society of London and individuals who have made a substantial contribution to the improvement of natural knowledge, including mathematics, engineering, science, and medical science, are admitted into this fellowship. So quite swanky. Next is FRGS, which stands for the Royal Geographical Society, often shortened to the RGS. And this is a learned society and professional body for geography based in the UK, founded in 1830 for the advancement of geographical sciences. This society has 16,000 members, with its work reaching the public through publications, research groups, and lectures. Propaganda. And the next one is FLS, which stands for the Linnean Society of London. This is another learned society dedicated to the study and dissemination of information concerning natural history, evolution, and taxonomy. It possesses several important biological specimen, manuscript, and literature collections, and publishes academic journals and books on plant and animal biology. The society also awards a number of prestigious medals and prizes. And I don't know if you remember, JoJo, but in our episode on the Garden Palace and the fire that destroyed it in its entirety back in the late 1800s, there was actually a whole heap of information, I guess you could call it, owned by the Linnean Society that went up in flames. So it was
Interesting.
interesting to
And
know.
what I find interesting about this society, they were formed in 1788.
I didn't even think of that. You're right.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Hey, Australia was
interesting.
founded in 1788. So
Yeah.
fascinating.
And the last one is FZS, and that stands for the Zoological Society of London. And this is a charity devoted to the worldwide conservation of animals and their habitats, founded in 1826, and it is maintained by the London Zoo and Whipsnade Park to this day.
Mm,
So he was part of quite a few different little groups, wasn't he?
he was. He was. And, you mentioned the Learned Society a couple times there. So what is that?
So a learned society is basically an organization that holds conferences to discuss the formation of or emergence and development of new disciplines or professions. So one of the oldest learned societies was founded in way back in 1323 in France.
Wow. Gosh. So this organization decides when new professions or disciplines can be formed and pushed out into society. How
Yeah,
weird.
yeah. So pretty much what's happening right now to this day
Mm,
still.
interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
Okay, so back to Darwin. Charles Robert Darwin, along with all those acronyms, was an English naturalist, geologist, and biologist, widely known for his contributions to evolutionary biology. His proposition that all species of life have descended from a common ancestor is now generally accepted and considered a fundamental concept in science. He was born in the UK in 1809 and died in 1882. At the age of 50, Darwin publishes this book, which has made him famous now, on the origin of species. And there are claims that Australia played an important role in his theory of evolution during a visit. And it's something to do with the platypus, which is one of our strangest mammals that combines the characteristics of so many different species in one. You'd think that that would actually debunk your theory, huh? But like those three scholars that we heard earlier mention, many people have discounted Darwin's work and written books about how they don't believe in the theory of evolution. And just check out the cover of this book.
Wow.
Mm. We're all too familiar with these symbols now, aren't we?
Mm.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And did you know that Erasmus Darwin, grandfather of Charles Darwin, was a Shmeeshmation?
Mm.
He was also a slave trade abolitionist and an influential scientist. He was initiated into the Lodge of St. David's, number 36 Scottish Constitution in 1754.
Wow.
Yeah, and of course, Charles and his son were also in the club.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I not surprised, JoJo?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So, how did they convince us that we came from primates and lived this primitive life despite everything we see around us, proving that there was definitely a far more superior race with capabilities beyond what we have today?
Well, Casey, we have been conditioned and brainwashed into believing that cavemen existed through the usual forms of media, commercials, cartoons, movies, all of this programming to give us the impression that we evolved from an early caveman and perhaps we're still a little bit Neanderthal, maybe?
Yeah, some people definitely. The reason we believed in them, though, is because we were told that they lived in cave systems throughout our realm and they built and carved them in this way. But we now know that a lot of these cave systems are in fact the ancient remnants of old world structures from fairly major recent cataclysmic events. Once you see what we see, you can't tell us that they built it this way. There's just no way.
Mm-mm. There's no way. And, you know, I actually got into all of this through Joaquin from Tartarian Meltdown, and he has been instrumental in showing us all of these melted structures and explaining his thoughts. And I totally recommend following him if you haven't, if you're not already following him actually on Instagram. He's also got a really good YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really important that we go to people like him who have done so much research, and he's partnered with many others who are doing the same or similar type research. And yeah, you can't unsee it once you see it.
No way.
Mm-mm. Okay, so let's break down this theory quickly. 5 million years ago, human evolution begins. There's your little fish, Casey.
There he is. G'day, mate. There seems to be a wide agreement that humanity separated from the apes about 2 to 3 million years ago.
And the first tool-making humans are apparently distinguished in the archaeological record about 2 million years ago.
At least 3 hominid forms were living in East Africa 2 million years ago. Stupid question, maybe, but does that mean that the fish off the east coast of Africa were the only ones that evolved? No other continent? Just the African fish?
Apparently, maybe, it's just perfect conditions there. Okay, back to this one. That is pretty funny, Casey. The earliest stone tools are dated about 1 to 2 million years ago, along with the use of fire, and humans spread from Africa.
Earliest humans used home bases that were less transitory than those of apes.
About 1.5 million years ago, they claim the first record classified by paleontologists as Homo erectus.
Sorry. Language and communication starts around 500,000 years ago.
200 to 500,000 years ago, other humans, Neanderthals, begin social interactions and the spread of fire.
Sapiens then spread to Arabia and Europe.
And lastly, Neanderthals become extinct about 30,000 years ago. So my stupid question is, were our First Nations people, did they exist at the same time as Neanderthals for like 20, 30,000 years, possibly coexisting? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Right. Yeah, because they say that our First Nations people can, they've been here for like 65,000 years plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So who's putting this imaginative timeline together? They obviously forgot this vital piece of information, unless it's a known thing. The Neanderthals should probably not be coexisting with Homo sapiens if this natural selection thing is true. And where are all those monkeys?
Mm.
Oh my gosh. So all these physics and 19th century scientists pointed out that our closest living relatives were apes, so we must have evolved from them, which makes us members of the order of primates. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Oh dear. But, Casey, some have hypothesized that humans separated from apes well before 40,000 years ago. But like we mentioned, general consensus is that Neanderthals became extinct 30,000 years ago. And if you take a look at this map showing how the early humans migrated, you'll see that everyone is said to have originated from Africa. So how is it that our First Nations people are considered the first, or is that just for our continent? It's a sensitive topic, but I'm just trying to make sense of all of this. And you know what, Casey? Look, it looks like Neanderthals did mix it up with the modern Homo sapiens way back when.
Oh gosh, so confusing.
Mm-hmm. Recently, I saw this ad, oh my gosh, an Aldi commercial that was released last year, and I was just blown away by its propaganda. Let's take a look.
To think we're all just tiny dots on dots, formed from the nuclear ash of dead stars. 6 million years in the making. Life emerging and re-emerging. Over and over. How special that anything exists at all. Wow. Let alone Aldi's special buys. It's special you can buy. Aldi, good, different.
Oh my gosh, that is a weird commercial for a grocery store, JoJo.
Uh-huh.
But everywhere you look, they're pushing the Big Bang Theory, yet another theory, and of course the theory of evolution. And look, if you were trying to convince a populace that they were insignificant, this is exactly what you would create, right? Like a theory so complex that you would have to believe it because you can't actually prove it wrong because you
Mm.
can't actually understand it anyway.
Mm-hmm. You can't.
No.
And if you go ahead and Google Big Bang Theory, this is what you'll find. And it's a sitcom featuring some characters that are on the spectrum using these big scientific words and pushing the whole space hoax as well.
At all. But anyway, the father of the Big Bang lie. So this is George Lemaitre, the Belgian Jesuit Schmeshermer, Roman Catholic priest who proposed the Big Bang Theory in 1927. The Pope in Lemaitre's time, Pius XII, was delighted that a Catholic priest had conceived of a scientifically valid creation story for the universe, even though it had nothing to do with the scriptures.
Wow, I never knew that.
Me neither. And look how quickly that theory spread. It's not even 100 years old.
Yeah, I never realised that.
So, like, where else in the history of modern man do we see a theory of evolution apart from, like, old mate Anaximander of Miletus, Greece from 500 BCE, mind you?
Mhm.
Any other era or time period is there recorded history or evidence of evolution from then to Darwin?
Actually, no. No cultures really have any art or even stories of man coming from apes or fish. And most ancient cultures have very different depictions. You know, our Renaissance period, for example, between the 13th and 17th centuries, right before the introduction of all these theories, mind you, was absolutely saturated in art depicting a completely different world. And much of the artwork illustrating cherubs and beautiful gardens and architecture, and the humans appearing even much larger too.
Yeah, and I don't see any Neanderthals in any of these paintings, Jojo.
No, no monkey men.
Now, remember this image from part one of our Australia and Antarctica episode? This stamp commemorating the International Geophysical Year, 1957 to 58, signifying the birth of a new era. Now, it's said that Michelangelo hid clues in his artwork. The main one in this image is that God and his angels are in what appears to be the human brain.
Wow, amazing, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've presented enough information to prove that evolution is a complete and utter hoax. We've been brainwashed and indoctrinated so much so that some will call what we're about to present a myth or legend, yet there is evidence everywhere of this. And folks would much rather believe in something like this, something they've only seen in movies, than this, seen in old pictures and in ancient doctrines.
All right. So, what about the story of creation? Like, we call it a story, firstly, it's not a theory. And stories and myths are more likely to be true. We talked about that in our last episode. We can't discount myth as stories in the same category as fairy tales or children's fiction. I think there is some truth to these so called myths that our ancestors have been sharing with us.
I agree. And to be clear, we are going to be using the Bible to look at the story of creation, but the three major religions.
We're not doing a Bible study, though, guys. Like, we're not going to be sitting down and reading the Bible.
No, gosh, no.
We're just be referring to parts of the Bible.
Parts of the Bible, yes. But I just wanted to make clear that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam readily fit the definition of monotheism, which is the worship of one God, while denying the existence of other gods. And they share the same understanding that the divine created the heavens, earth, and everything in between in 6 days. But the relationship of the three religions is closer than that. They claim to worship the same God. And the oldest organized faith, Zoroastrianism, is an Iranian religion, and it has a dualistic cosmology of good and evil within the framework of monotheistic ontology. And it's said that most religions stem from this ancient one.
Wow. Okay. So we were just talking about this the other day, JoJo. Back when we were kids during the Easter holidays here in Australia, the kids get a 2-week school holidays. And when we were kids in the 80s and 90s, the free to air channels, which is all we had back then, no Netflix or anything around back in those days, would show all the old biblical movies on repeat or on marathons, as they call it today. You remember?
Yep, I remember watching 10 Commandments and so many others.
Yeah, I remember the 10 Commandments because it went for so long.
So
And I
long.
remember being little and I was allowed to stay up to watch it, and I was so excited.
Yep.
But yeah,
loads of biblical stories.
yeah, but that's not a thing anymore, is it?
No,
like that.
it isn't. It's really, really strange. And you know what? And when we're looking for these images of these movies, this came up, which is not a biblical story, but it's a biopic on Charles Darwin, and ironically, it's called Creation.
Blasphemy.
100%. Blasphemy. It's a blasphemy. It is a blasphemy. And Casey, what about today's kids' television programming? It looks a lot like this.
Clone High. Wow. I don't know about that one.
XFIT, which is in training. And then this one really blew me away. This boy discovers that when he wears his aunt's magical ring, it transforms him into a female superhero. So he basically turns into drag.
Oh my gosh. Oh my! I'm so glad I do not have a small child anymore. If this is the crap that they are putting into our children's heads, that is disturbing. I used to work in childcare, so I know how many little boys play superheroes. You know what I mean? Imagine the superheroes they're playing now in the playground. Oh yeah, I'm going to turn into a drag queen. What?
I know, Casey.
Oh,
and then, do you remember? You actually reminded me of this show, and it's called Little Demon, and this came out last year.
Yeah, this one is meant to be a light animated horror comedy series. But listen to this, JoJo. It's centering on a mother who was impregnated by Satan 13 years ago, and Chrissy, her Antichrist daughter, who has just come into her demonic powers and is trying to navigate an ordinary life. The two are constantly thwarted by monstrous forces, including Satan, who yearns for custody of his daughter's soul.
I cannot even believe that this is actually a program on FX. And look at all the symbolism in this picture.
Yeah. I'm literally speechless at this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if anyone lets their children watch this show, they are in for a rude shock. Seriously.
I know, Casey, I seriously can't believe that this is what kids are being subjected to. And it seems to be everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's some sort of satanic undertone, but it's pretty blatant now. It's just, I just hope parents are paying attention to what their kids are watching these days, especially Disney. Everyone thinks it's innocent, but it is not. Okay, Disney Kids is got some of the most indoctrination I've ever seen. My son doesn't watch Disney at all. He's not allowed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Netflix even has a satanic stories category.
What?
I know.
Oh my gosh. I did not know that.
Yep.
That's disturbing.
Yeah.
Who just goes, I feel like watching something satanic on Saturday night? Like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So we got a bit sidetracked there, but let's get back to creation. So where did we, JoJo, as humans, all begin? Like, what is the story of creation, and should we take this story so literally?
So before we go into the story of creation, let's take a look at the Bible. Like we said, we're going to use the Bible for the story of creation. The Bible is an anthology, a compilation of texts of a variety of forms, originally written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Koine Greek. These texts include instructions, stories, poetry, and prophecies, among other genres.
The books of the Bible were said to be written under the supernatural guidance of the Holy Spirit or God by laymen and scholars, commoners and nobility, containing 66. I don't like that number, Jojo.
Strange, huh?
Yeah, 66 ancient books that have been that have shaped laws, influenced culture, and inspired billions of people over 3 millennia. And Genesis 1 is where you will find the story of creation.
And, people will argue that the Bible is incomplete because there are missing books, or they say lost books. And there's been so many translations that may have been misinterpreted. And also you'll hear that the Jesuit Schmeschwitz possibly corrupted the Bible altogether. But who knows?
Maybe that's why there's 66 books now.
Mm-hmm.
They took out some to make 66. I don't know.
That's a bit suspicious, isn't it?
Genesis 1, verse 1. In the Beninging, in the Beninging, yeah, in the
Listen properly.
in the Beninging, yeah, in the Beninging, in the Beninging. In the Beninging.
Okay, so Genesis 1, which is the first book, it starts with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And this is from the King James Version. And if you would like to read the rest of the verses, please pause. We're just going to go ahead and fast forward to Adam and Eve.
God created Adam at a time when the earth was still void, forming him from the earth's dust and breathing into his nostrils the breath of life. God then gave Adam the primeval Garden of Eden to tend, but on penalty of death commanded him not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Before we move on, can we take a look at where this so-called Garden of Eden is?
Yes, so the location of Eden is described in the book of Genesis as the source of 4 tributaries. Various suggestions have been made for its location at the head of the Persian Gulf in southern Mesopotamia, now modern day Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers run into the sea, and in Armenia.
Subsequently, so that Adam would not be alone, God created other animals, but finding these insufficient, put Adam to sleep, took from him a rib, and created a new companion, Eve. The two were persons of innocence, until Eve yielded to the temptations of the evil serpent, and Adam joined her in eating the forbidden fruit, whereupon they both recognized their nakedness and donned fig leaves as garments. Immediately God recognized their transgression and proclaimed their punishments. For the women, pain in childbirth and subordination to man, and for the man, relegation to an accursed ground with which he must toil and sweat for his subsistence. Their first children were Cain and Abel, twins. Abel, the keeper of sheep, was highly regarded by God and was killed by Cain out of envy. Another son, Seth, was born to replace Abel, and the 2 human stems, the Cainites and the Sethites, descended from them. Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters, and death came to Adam at the age of 930.
So, from what I understand, the serpent is most often identified as Satan. And when they say Eve was tempted, she was actually impregnated by him at the same time as she was expecting Adam's child. This is called heteropaternal superfecundation. And I promise I'm not swearing or cursing. But the twins come from separate eggs and sperm, 2 different seeds from the same mother. And so starts the seed line war or the seed war. And this concept was introduced to me by the late, great Rob Skiba. And we're actually going to use parts of his presentation on the Genesis revelation, how God has revealed the end from the beginning. And it's what he calls a most peculiar timeline.
Wow. So I've heard of that doctrine of the serpent seed, also known as the dual seed or the 2 seed line doctrine. And it's said to be, controversial and fringe Christian religious belief, which explains the biblical account of the fall of man by stating that the serpent mated with Eve in the Garden of Eden, and the offspring of their union was Cain.
Yep, that's exactly what I've heard too. And whenever I hear that it's a fringe or controversial, I can't help but think that there's some truth to it. So let's take a look at Rob Skiba's findings. So this most peculiar timeline starts with God creates the world in 6 literal days, describing essentially a snow globe-style enclosed world cosmology.
Shortly after Adam and Eve are placed in the Garden of Eden, a serpent deceives them into disobeying God, and a seed war begins.
Cain kills his brother Abel. Seth replaces Abel, and the messianic seed is to come from his line.
The Genesis 6 experiment occurs.
Over a 1200-year time period, all flesh becomes corrupted through various forms of Nephilim hybridization.
God destroys the whole world with a flood, preserving only those who made it onto Noah's ark.
The whole earth is populated by Noah's 3 sons.
So what do you think was actually happening back then, JoJo? What corruption do you think God was witnessing? Like hybridization, Nephilim? I mean, do you think something like this was happening? Like half human, half beast creatures?
Mm-hmm.
Look at all these images here and these.
I know, and you can't deny these images, huh?
Like they had to come from somewhere. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yep.
So creepy looking.
I know. And I mean, I think that is possibly what God was witnessing.
Mm. Yeah, it's clear that those actions were an abomination in the eyes of God, but what about what's happening today? Well, actually, it's been happening for a while now. I mean, would this be considered an abomination, do you think, JoJo? An abomination is something that causes disgust or hatred, and desolation is a state of complete emptiness or destruction. Jesus warned that something or someone that people detested would stand in the temple someday. When the horror occurred, residents of Judea should seek cover without delay. Other translations speak of the abomination that causes desolation, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration, and that horrible thing. The Amplified Bible adds the note that the abomination of desolation is the appalling sacrilege that astonishes and makes desolate.
Hmm. And in Proverbs, they list 7 things which are also considered abominations: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are swift in running to mischief, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. I recently saw the description on this documentary on Netflix about the movie Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, that states that this film helped usher in LGBTQ themes into the mainstream. Now, look, I'm not trying to stir the pot here because I really am all for, diversity and inclusion, but I don't see the need to make this mainstream. Things that can happen after dark and used to happen after dark are now out in broad daylight, and it's starting to get ridiculous.
Yeah, this movie's like, 20 something years old. And now this way of life is everywhere, including the recent F1 Grand Prix in Melbourne just the other month. So they booted off the traditional female grid girls for being inappropriately dressed and replaced them with these drag queens.
Mm.
Like, they didn't even get like good looking drag queens. Like, seriously, what the hell is going on? How is this okay?
I don't know, Casey. They say that God created man and woman in his image. And I tell you what we're witnessing today is the destruction of women and men. This trans movement is delegitimizing and erasing biological women and feminizing men. And we're kind of left with this neutral gender or androgynous, transgendered people who want to push their agendas onto our children. Are we going to continue turning a blind eye to all this? Just sit around being complacent, allowing this to become mainstream? And, ladies, I just want you to know you don't need fake boobs, hair extensions, or lashes to feel feminine. And women today seem to be looking more and more like these fake women. And soon we won't even be able to distinguish between the two. And maybe that's all part of the plan.
Yep, there's those haughty eyes. Now, Pride here in Australia lasts an entire month, and Mardi Gras, which hijacked a Christian holiday, by the way. So, Mardi Gras is traditionally celebrated on Fat Tuesday, the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday, and the start of Lent. But anyway, so during Mardi Gras, our streets are closed off and decorated. This mural was painted on a main road in Sydney and vandalised the very next day, rightfully so. There are endless festivals and rainbow everything, everywhere for the whole month. But our Anzacs, the men and women who fought and died for our nation, get one day of remembrance,
Mhm.
And the last few years during COVID, that didn't even happen. We weren't allowed to march or anything. So It's annoying, but also keep in mind that pride is also the first of the 7 deadly sins. Which is
Mm, wow. Like, why do we have to have weeks long celebrations recognizing this community that makes up, I think, now about 5% or 4 or 5% of our entire population today? And that's a massive increase from our 2016 census, where less than 1% were identifying as LGBTQ plus. And, you know, Casey, you and I are both from military families. You've got 2 brothers who currently serve, and my husband serve in the armed forces. So we know what kind of sacrifices that they've made. And it just doesn't make any sense. You know, we're not going to go on anymore on this because I feel like we've made our point. But is this part of God's plan, inverting all that is righteous and natural? And is it possible that we're on the brink of another event or deluge?
heavy stuff, JoJo. Very heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on because, as always, we can get pretty sidetracked. So we ended on hybridization before digressing into transgenderism. So, yeah, where are we at now?
Okay, so God destroys the whole world with a flood, preserving only those who made it onto Noah's ark.
And then the whole earth is populated by Noah's 3 sons. So, according to the scriptures, God sent the floodwaters as a judgment, a block in the way of humanity's wickedness that rose out of the grief of his heart, which makes sense. But what puzzles me, Jojo, is how was the earth repopulated by Noah's 3 sons? Like, where were all the women? And you and I recently watched the Noah movie, you know, one with Russell Crowe.
Yep.
And it was very,
Dramatic.
good. Yeah, with strange rock angel creatures. But like we mentioned earlier, there was one wife for Shem, but there didn't appear to be any others for Ham or Japheth. Yeah?
Yeah, that's a valid question. And, you know, Hollywood, of course, they dramatized the whole story in that movie. But Genesis, like the movie, describes the flood as the decreation of the world and carries Noah's family through the flood unharmed to start afresh with no mentions of others. But, you know, Rob Skiba does say those who made it onto the ark. So I guess we are to assume that there were maybe stowaways, possibly. I don't know. I'm just saying that. But I was actually recently told that each son did have a wife. So, but it's still very difficult to believe that we are all now descendants of Noah's 3 sons. It's a bit interesting.
Yeah, I can't get my head around that one either. But can we just back it up again, before the great flood, where God is said to describe the wickedness taking place on earth, not just human animal hybridization, but the mention of the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
So Genesis 6 reads, "And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with men, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." That just confuses me, Jojo, because I thought men were the sons of God. Like, what are they referring to, or what is the Bible referring to here?
Yeah, I actually can't explain it myself. So let's watch this video that Cosmic Pitch put together a video interview.
And so these are the angels that rebelled and followed Satan. And these are the ones that created the giants and did crimes against humanity and crimes against creation before the flood, and then likely again after the flood. And so Nephil are the offspring, and they are fallen as well, because the word is rooted in that as the context. They are the spurious offspring of the fallen ones. Now, they have a choice, just like the angels had a choice to follow God or to follow their procreators, which in this case are the fallen angels. So they are fallen ones as well. But they are Nephilim versus Nephilim, if you can sort of make that sort of distinction. And one's the root, one's the source, one's the offspring. And then the demons are the disembodied spirits of those giants, because they were given an immortal spirit. The spirit's not permitted to go to sleep, and it's not permitted to go to heaven. So it's either going to find its way to Sheol and Hades, or it's going to wander the earth looking for a body to possess and a place to rest, or it's going to go to the abyss, as Ezekiel 32 talks about, into the sides of the abyss as the terrible ones.
Okay, I really like that video. It really explained a lot to me. But said that the sons of God are the fallen angels, and they produced giants or Nephilim with the daughters of man. So I'm glad that we're kind of breaking this down, because it can get lost in translation. And for someone like me who did not grow up with, any religious background whatsoever, it's helping me to understand. But Nephilim, making
How
children
huge.
human women, like, ouch, like
I know.
that's all I could think of then. Like,
I
oh my
know.
gosh.
But I think they were a larger species too, I think. But again, still, yeah, it's hard to comprehend, isn't it?
It is. I don't want to think about the details.
That's not, the devil's in the details.
Oh.
Sorry, I had to say that. But Casey, this actually reminded me of an excursion that I had in Manly with some of our Tartarian truther friends. And here you can see Lisa and Dan. G'day, Lisa
Hey,
and
guys.
Dan. And this is actually a war memorial commemorating the fallen soldiers of World War One. And it's in Manly, like I said. And the plaque reads, "There were giants in the earth in those days." And we kept on looking at this going, why would that be a relevant quote for our World War One veterans? Like we just, but I just couldn't help but think now, were there survivors of the Great Flood, these giants and maybe the Nephilim, or whatever we want to call these entities, even demons even, I don't know, but considered this half divine, half human creature?
Yeah, well, that kind of explains why there's so much art that depicts a larger species. And there's photos of giants pre-World War One, stuff we actually can see that has been discounted altogether now, with the resets. And Lisa actually posed the question, were these subsequent resets designed to wipe out the Nephilim? And could this plaque commemorating the soldiers of World War One actually be for finally ridding this realm of giants altogether? I mean, look at these pictures, JoJo.
Yep. And people like in our community know that they circulate these kind of images all the time. And we're all fascinated by it, because we just like, where are they? Where are they?
Yeah.
Now, for this next part of this most peculiar timeline, it talks a little bit more on this, crossbreed species. So Nimrod was born in 1908 AM, which is the year since creation.
Abraham was born in 1948 AM, and the seed war continues with two human players on the cosmic chessboard, Nimrod versus Abraham.
Nimrod builds a tower in order to reach into heaven and ultimately attempts to kill God. His plan fails when God confounds the languages. People disperse, all talking about the same guy, Nimrod, only now with different names. Hence, he becomes the rebellious god of this world.
Abraham produces Isaac, who produces Jacob, who is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel.
The stage is now set for the entire biblical narrative, which ultimately leads to Messiah and his final victory in the cosmic seed war.
Interesting. So 2 different lineages in a cosmic seed battle. It seems so sci-fi, JoJo.
I know, and it kind of reminds me of that Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and it seems to talk about those coming from the heavens or outer space in this case. I use that term loosely, but could this be true? You know, because in this movie, Star-Lord is the son of a human mother and alien father.
And they've got like all the hybrid characters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Many past civilizations, and I guess current movies seem to talk about those coming from the heavens or space. So would this be true? Revelation in the method.
Mm-hmm. Always hidden in plain sight, Casey. So these are the 3 sons of Noah who survived the flood and their descendants. These bloodlines seem to represent the good seed versus the bad seed or evil seed, maybe. And one line is from the father of idolatry and the other, the father of faith. Yeah. Okay. So those descendants of Ham, the scriptures said nothing about Nimrod being a hunter of men. He was a mighty hunter and a mighty builder of cities. That is what is written.
The children of Shem were Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram, in addition to unnamed daughters. Abraham, the patriarch of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, was one of the descendants of Arphaxad. Islamic literature describes Shem as one of the believing sons of Noah, the messianic seed.
Interesting, isn't it?
Hmm.
So far, we've presented what's transpired between the time of Adam and Nimrod. And are we to assume that Nimrod, being the descendant of Ham, was the offspring of a fallen son of God and a daughter of man, making him that half human, half supernatural creature?
And you can see in this timeline that Noah walked the earth 3000 BC, so 5,000 years ago. This story is recounted in many different cultures. Look at this image. Looks like many fled and perhaps survived. And I guess if you were of a larger stature, you had a better chance of survival, yeah?
Yep, definitely. And then we insert Nimrod, who is the lesser known ruler, and he ruled somewhere between 3,200 and 2,850 BCE, and is known for the construction of the Tower of Babel, like we mentioned, that was forbidden. And he persuaded his people not to ascribe to God. And again, you will see the survivors of this cataclysm in this image. And, note the construction styles too. Bright Green Barbie posted these images a little while back, and she actually took these off Electric Being, but she says that the times before the flood have been portrayed in movies as nomadic, uncivilized age, where people were agrarian with unstructured cities and unorganized government. And she believes that the opposite is true. The sons of the Most High stated clearly in the book of Matthew 24 that, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the last days of earth. And we are told that that's how earth was before the flood, looking very kind of uncivilized and no structures. But if you take a look, we see these ruins all over our realm.
Mm. Interesting. So, two major recorded cataclysms. We know of others like Sodom and Gomorrah. We don't have time for that story. Strangely, though, Gomorrah is the name of the Star Lord's girlfriend in Guardians of the Galaxy. So,
So strange. In that most peculiar timeline by Rob Skiba, we did mention that when God destroyed the Tower of Babel, he created 69 new languages amongst the people and scattered them around the world. So now divided by 70 languages, which, Hebrew was the original, it kind of explains why our languages are so similar in certain regions. But would you believe that there's some 7,100 languages today that all stem from those 70 languages?
wow, I would never have guessed that there would be that many. 7,100.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting coincidence, although we know that there are no coincidences, JoJo. But that one main language app that everyone's kind of raving about is called Babbel.
Hmm.
Spelled a little bit differently, but yeah. Mm.
Definitely no coincidences there.
No.
Okay, so back to Nimrod quickly, because he's an interesting character and he's known as the man of many names. You can see here that he was known to many of the ancient civilizations. And we just added, the regions of where these names were from.
Yeah. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. I did not realize that he was known in so many different places by so many different names.
Mm-hmm. And some of these nefarious characters like Baal,
Yeah.
Ra
Mm-hmm.
on the world stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's pretty fascinating, isn't he, this bloke?
Yeah. And I just always keep thinking of why they would name their Antarctica mission after Nimrod.
Mm-hmm.
That's just so weird. Anyway, I think we should try and get to the bottom of that, like find out why they chose that name for that expedition.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've seen the possibility of genetic manipulation with human, animal hybrid, mixing animal species too. So it makes sense that God found this to be an abomination and flooded the lands, followed by a great ruler that tried to eliminate God and turn his people against him. So brings destruction and speech confusion, which explains ruins around the world and all the different languages. But what doesn't make sense to me, Jojo, are the races of man. Evolution definitely doesn't address this either. Like we've got so many different races all around the world, all looking so different. And then we have our indigenous people discovered not long ago. How do you explain all that?
Mm-hmm. I know, and I can't help but speculate that our indigenous could be the descendants of the sons of Jacob, which is a descendant of Abraham. And when God forced the people out of Babylon, it's possible that our indigenous people are maybe from that bloodline. It's hard to tell. I mean, I don't know biblical cosmology enough to know how the races were dispersed, but that's just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told at one stage that all the continents were one over time, and that maybe perhaps after each major cataclysm and reset, it pushed the lands out further and further, separating the people and the lands, creating these little pockets of different cultures.
Yeah, well, that's true. They say that, everything used to be connected. It was Gondwana land, Antarctica, Australia, everything was all one land. But yeah, it's still tricky, isn't it? Because even evolution doesn't explain that, because it says that we're also to have originated from Africa.
Yeah.
And as for our Indigenous people here in Australia, they too have a story of a great flood. This article we found on creation.com, which details similarities to Genesis and the Dreamtime stories of our First Nations people. So, unknown to most people, the Australian Aboriginals have many traditions surprisingly similar to parts of the book of Genesis, especially those regarding creation and Noah's flood. In fact, flood stories, which include the saving of only a few people and animals, are found in many cultures worldwide and provide fascinating circumstantial evidence that the common ancestor of Aboriginals, Jews, and indeed all modern races of man was Noah. The Genesis account, however, is the most detailed and systemic of them all. So the Bundabar flood story has many similarities to Genesis, and their story states that there were survivors.
Wow, that's pretty interesting, hey?
Yeah. So I don't know, like, what do you think?
I don't know, Casey. I mean, with all the wickedness that's going on now, I know what I'm thinking. Have you heard about the elite bloodlines?
Yeah, I have.
The bloodlines of the elites that trace back to the black nobility families. Yeah, I mean, many, many books have been written about these families, and you can just search up uh, the elite bloodlines, and you'll find so much information. But this last book was written by my friend Amy Hunter, called Sinaki, The Complete Guide to the Elite Groups That Ruled the World in the 21st Century, covers all of it. And I actually just got my copy on Amazon just the other day. And she also has this great podcast on Spotify that goes deep into the connections of these families. And it'll seriously blow your mind if you want to learn a little bit more about the bloodlines. Go check her out. I'll leave a link in the description below as well for you if you are interested.
Yeah,
But
that sounds like a fascinating book. I'd love to read that after you, JoJo.
Yep.
But I can't imagine tracing our bloodlines back 5,000 years, but I guess it's entirely possible seeing who the ruling elite really are.
Yeah, it's interesting. But do you remember, this is maybe going back a few years ago, but everybody was doing these DNA tests. One was in the States called 23andMe, and I think you told me that everybody was doing Ancestry
Yeah,
DNA.
Ancestry.com here in Australia. I even got one for my dad for his birthday.
Did you? That was
I
big,
feel
wasn't it? It
terrible.
was really big. And I always wondered, like, why was that such a big thing? Why were they trying to test our DNA to see what our genealogy was? Like, it just felt really weird. And I think it was a way for these elites, ruling elites, trying to weed out the bloodlines, maybe.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And it's no coincidence that all the presidents of the United States are related. I remember learning about this a while back, and I think there's only one that's not. And they can also all trace their ancestry back to King John of England, who reigned in the 1200s. So there's definitely something there.
I agree. And, they do say that presidents are selected, not elected.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay, so now, because we've gone all over the place, and we're going to change the topic a little bit here, but do you think that perhaps we're headed for like some other industrial revolution where the claim is that they, the controllers, will prioritize a greater collaboration between humans and machines through cyber-physical systems between humans and technologies?
100%. It was all ushered in, unbeknownst to most, during the pandemic. But yeah, it certainly looks like we're headed that way. Remember, we showed you all these guys where were these the people orchestrating these planned agendas we see unfolding all around us today in the guise of globalization? I mean, these men helped shape the world we see today, pushing what seems to be a much bigger agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And, we keep hearing in the pipeline this whole new world order, one world government, one world digital currency, universal basic income system, sustainable development, 15-minute cities, gender equality. And by the way, there's only two genders, population control. I mean, this list goes on.
It really does make sense that these elite bloodlines, perhaps the descendants of Ham, are behind all of it, because look at who rules the world now. Now, these guys are just puppets, actors in the grand scheme of things, all related, I'm sure, all pushing the same world domination through population control, environmental activism, AI technologies, and another great reset.
And this from Electric Being, who I think put it so well. It's simple. Worldwide governments falsifying where we live is the epitome of mind control. History is already obscured and shrouded in secrecy. The treaty, which I'm sure he's referring to the Antarctic Treaty, is an attempt to hide our true origin and our natural purpose. We're considered Goyim, cattle, and Antarctica is the icy fence of the farm. My guess is they're trying to hide more land and a firmament, mark of the Creator, the GAOTU, the Grand Architect of the Universe, as the Shmishmations call him, to discover beyond doubt that you, your world, and your existence were all created would destroy the very power and control systems they've put in place. So, are they in fact hiding God, the Grand Architect of the Universe? And could this be the end times for humanity as we know it? And guys, you know what? Casey and I have heard of the predictions made by the likes of Archaics, but if this is true, that we're on this path of a great reset, what is it that we can do to stop it? And if it is cyclical, can we actually prevent it from happening?
Some believe we're witnessing or living in the time of Revelation. The book of Revelation, or Apocalypse of John, is the last biblical book of the New Testament. Many speculate that given the current state of affairs in the world, that we should be expecting another cataclysm and even the second coming of Christ preceding the end of the age. The Bible clearly instructs us to be vigilant, but it also teaches that no one can say for certain that we are living in the end times. So who really knows?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we've talked now extensively on the theory of evolution and the story of creation, and both seem so wild, and some parts are actually really hard to swallow. But I can't help but lean towards the whole creation story with how everything is panning out in the world these days.
Yeah, well, it seems more legit to me than a fish flopping out of the ocean and growing legs.
I mean, I agree, Casey. So get this. The human DNA is made up of two linked strands that wind around each other to resemble a twisted ladder. The shape is known as the double helix. Last year, June 2nd, 2022, commemorating her 7-decade reign, the late Queen Elizabeth lit up a triple stranded DNA structure leading up to the Tree of Knowledge. And according to Buckingham Palace, the installation was aimed to put the importance of trees at the heart of the Jubilee.
Yeah, right. More like a very significant ritual showing the rest of the elites of the world that they have managed to inject the masses with a DNA altering substance. I mean, why the fuck are they messing with our DNA, JoJo?
Mm.
Unless we are still in that seed war. The bloodlines and all that is still happening, and we're all just totally unaware, going about our lives oblivious. I mean, are they trying to rid the world of the good and allowing the evil to take over, just like they were doing way back when?
Oh, gosh, I'm absolutely mind blown. And with that, we'll leave you to ponder upon this. And we hope to see you next time.
Yeah. See you later.
Bye-bye.